Hi, I'm Brandon Fertig. This is the Periphery. I'm here today to talk about my reinvigorated efforts on this channel. The other day I was in the gas station buying coffee, and I encountered the newsstand and this latest edition of my local newspaper, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. It might not seem that out of the ordinary, and even upon reading, the material on the cover might not seem out of the ordinary, but for some reason, this story here caught my eye. It's about a group of 4 women who've recently started this new country western band. And a priority of their music is a political one, is a ideological one. And the message they want to send is there is a gender bias in the country music industry. Now, in this year, 2019, and previous recent years, this idea of gender bias isn't out of the ordinary either. But I just thought in this particular industry, I wouldn't think this would be a popular rallying cry. And maybe that's why the New York Times wrote a story about it, and the Star Tribune then did a reprint and featured it at the top of their newspaper. I bought the newspaper. I took it home and read the story, and they give no data, no statistics for this supposed gender bias. They say that there's been a recent decline in the number of women, female country artists who hold top spots. I take the story as a word for it. But in saying that it's been recent years, that would imply that in previous decades, women were better represented, and then that would imply that this is a new phenomenon, or that we were less sexist back, say, in the 90s, as opposed to today, where we're apparently more sexist. Stories like that aren't written to be dissected and analyzed like that. They're written to be just taken for face value without much question. And for whatever reason, this particular story, to me, it is emblematic of the face of where we're at today in the world of mainstream media, where it's more about the narrative and accepting this belief than it is about discovering what truth is. You know, the Star Tribune isn't alone. The New York Times isn't alone. It's rampant in television media. It's rampant in art, culture and arts. It's rampant in academia. It's rampant in big tech. People who think independently know that this is like a religion. It's like a story being told over the whole society. It's like a theocracy where the whole society has to believe a certain thing. Independent thinkers know better, but the official, socially accepted narrative is one thing. And you know, this isn't unique to this time in history. But what is interesting and I guess troubling and noteworthy is that it's the people and institutions that are supposed to be in charge of promoting truth, discovering truth. It's them in academia, in media, who are expanding and promoting this narrative. And I say this as somebody who has spent a long time and has worked a long time alongside these institutions. I wrote for the Star Tribune on a number of occasions. I visited Cuba, and I wrote about life in Cuba, how it compares to life in the U.S. So it was just sort of shining a light on these two worlds and just trying to understand them better. I wrote a story about the Hmong migration to Minnesota, how no one could have predicted how well that migration would have turned out. It serves as an example for how refugees can assimilate while also maintaining their own culture and doing it in in a harmonious way. And then on a couple of occasions, I wrote about, in both of these stories cases, inner city turmoil, and I wrote about nonprofits that are working within these communities to make them better. I mention all this not as a complaint, not as a sob story. I'm not interested in sympathy here. I'm simply making observations about what the space looks like. And in making that observation about where those industries are going, or the characteristics they've assumed in their promotion of a narrative over truth, and of a progressive narrative over actually encouraging progress. And so me, as a independent media creator, it puts me in a position to come out on this video and say, hey, I'm going to simply work here. I'm not going to continue to try to get work with these major media outlets. My channel is called The Periphery, to encompass what's happening around, particularly locally in the United States, looking at the directions we're headed, looking at the stories that might not be ordinarily shared from the periphery into focus. And this includes the most important aspect of why I do what I do, and that's to share solutions. So how to reduce homelessness, how to see deaths in the inner city go down. We can restart how we implement solutions, how we come up with solutions, and how we implement solutions. And that's what I really want this channel to be for, ultimately. I'm going to share stories. I'm going to share, eventually I'll have my documentary streaming on this channel about this homeless camp. I'm going to create another documentary about the homelessness issue just in general across the country. I visited the West Coast cities, I visited cities in Texas, and of course I live here in the Twin Cities. And each of these pockets are different politically, and they have different experiences with how they've seen homelessness either grow or, in the case of Houston, shrink. And so I can use these as examples to compare. And then also looking at the history of homelessness and why we went from hobos who were predominantly white men in the 50s to then seeing the ascent, the genesis and the ascent of what we call the new homeless, which is what we have today. I'll look at these topics, and then I'll want to promote solutions. Being outside of the mainstream means that I don't have the typical economic, financial resources that someone within these channels would have. That means I don't receive compensation, monetary compensation, for most of my work. This is where you can help. This is where you can become a part of what I do, of what this channel will stand for. I'll have a Patreon for US dollars. Eventually, I want to migrate to more donations with cryptocurrency because it's cleaner, it's quicker. There'll be no middleman to take a cut of the money. Regarding my Patreon, a lot of channels, a lot of creators, a lot of independent individuals who are supported on Patreon are going to promise you some perks. I don't have a perk list right now, other than you'll have more access to me, and I might do some Q&As, things like that. But I'm simply looking for people who want to donate because they want to donate to a good cause. You know, it's the mission of this channel to be as, not emotion-free, but fear-free, free of fear, which ultimately drives bias, and full of love, which ultimately fuels the desire to promote good. Good stories, good work, good organizations, good people, just good things happening. And there are many good things happening, and there are many truths not being told because People tell you they're not good truths. The interviews I've done with individuals that have become popular on this channel are so because I'm able to just talk to people free of any agenda and let them share their story, and to let people who might not think like the individuals I interview connect with them nonetheless and see that, oh, this is a human being. That's the power of a agenda-free approach. And I'm excited and eager to continue on that path. More interviews, more stories, promoting more solutions and efforts to the problems, which in many cases are getting worse. In a world, in a society at least, the institutions that were supposed to be the ones doing this are no longer doing it, or at least not doing it as well. So we need I don't want to say revolution, that brings to mind all kinds of drama, but just a renaissance then of good, honest work. You can see the writing on the wall when it comes to the current state of media and articles like the one that they promote. It's if you think beyond the present, if you look ahead to what's likely to happen with this group, they'll make music, but because it's being distracted, because it's being fueled by an outside influence, by an outside energy besides just the desire to make good music, that they're going to create music that people aren't going to like as much. And what will happen on account of that? Well, you'll see 4 female country western singers not at the top of the charts. And that's why they were in the story in the first place, because of the lack of women at the top of the chart. Their mission, probably not consciously, but their mission will subconsciously perpetuate itself by undermining their musical output, affecting their success, and then being an example of that which they say is the problem, giving them more reason to think the way they do, and giving the author, or any number of authors today, a reason to write more of the same kind of material. It's a trap. It's a cycle. It's a downward spiral. One that I'm hopping off of with this channel, with my work, and one that I hope you might consider coming along on. I have so many thoughts on so many issues that I think could be so helpful, and I look forward to sharing them in a healthy, productive way, a diplomatic way, a solution-oriented way. And I look forward to you being with me as I do so. Thank you so much for your time.